Arthur Pendleton's life was built on structure. Every morning he rose at precisely 6 o'clock a.m., slipped into his tailored suit, and made his way to the elegant downtown office building where he oversaw a team of young architects. The crew adored his calm confidence and eye for detail. He carried himself with an almost regal precision which made him seem invulnerable to doubt or improvisation. Older staff members referred to him as the most stable man they'd ever known. Younger ones asked how he managed to be so consistent and perfectly composed at all times. He would usually nod, acknowledging their curiosity with a slight smile, and reply, "I have found that routine gets things done." Then he'd turn back to his work or shift the conversation to the latest project. A certain air of formality always hovered around him, in part because he demanded excellence and offered the same. Arthur had married Claire, a pragmatic attorney, nearly 25 years ago. She was in her late 40s like him, a determined professional who matched his diligence with her own brand of resolute efficiency. Their townhouse, nestled in a quiet, upscale neighborhood, was a testament to both of their successes. It had a spacious living area with high ceilings and an open floor plan that Arthur himself had overseen during its renovation. Late in the evening, they often discussed the day's challenges, Claire's legal briefs, Arthur's design complications, and all the various intricacies of professional life that might interest the other. They seemed like a perfectly matched pair, content in their own ways. Yet for all their apparent peace, Arthur harbored a secret that he guarded more fiercely than any contract or schematic. Late at night, behind the locked door of his private home office, he dressed in clothes not typically associated with a man of his stature. It had started as a strange, spontaneous impulse during a hectic period a few years earlier, when deadlines loomed and sleep was scarce. He'd discovered one of Claire's cardigans draped over a chair in their bedroom, and in a haze of exhaustion, slipped it on just to feel something different on his skin. The act had proven surprisingly calming. Instead of the tension that accompanied his usual suits and ties, the softer fabric eased a part of his mind he rarely let see daylight. From that moment on, he kept returning to the idea. His hidden identity, which he would quietly refer to as Alice, became a private sanctuary. He had been meticulous from the start, knowing how quickly the slightest oversight could unmask him. He ordered items discreetly, locked them in a small trunk under his desk, and made sure every new item had a plausible explanation if Claire happened to spot any evidence. After all, Claire worked with high-profile clients and understood the art of uncovering secrets. If she ever suspected something was off, she would do more than glance his way. She would dig until she found answers. Despite the cautious approach, he started buying more clothes: a flowing skirt, a soft blouse, a pair of heels, and eventually a small selection of makeup products. Each piece he wore, each shade of lipstick he tested in the mirror, granted a reprieve from the unyielding demands he usually faced. He didn't consider it a rejection of who he was. Rather, it felt like the moment he could breathe without the weight of professional and social obligations strangling him. No one outside the house knew. He never breathed a word to friends or colleagues. His world, though outwardly stable, contained this clandestine element he felt compelled to preserve. Yet the deeper he ventured into these nocturnal rituals, the sharper his fear grew. What if Claire found out? What if in the middle of the night she knocked on his office door at the wrong moment? Claire, for her part, had observed changes in him for months. His stress levels had seemed manageable before, but something was different now. He often slipped away right after dinner, claiming deadlines or phone calls that needed privacy. He returned much later, sometimes with faint signs of fatigue or agitation. The more it happened, the more uneasy she became. She was no fool. Claire had spent her career dissecting patterns of behavior in depositions. In the past, if they had an urgent day ahead, they'd speak about it openly. Lately, he had grown vague. The new secrecy left her unsettled. One evening, as they finished dinner, Claire placed her silverware neatly on the table and looked up. "You're going to lock yourself in that office again, aren't you?" she asked, her tone measured. She was never one to accuse without reason, but she had to know if something bigger was at play. Arthur paused, placing his napkin beside his plate. "I have these design revisions that just can't wait," he replied. "The project in Midtown has a compressed schedule, and I need to go over the calculations one more time. I'll probably be up late." She nodded and said, "Do you need help with anything else first? A case in the kitchen or anything around the house?" He shook his head. "No, I'm fine, really. Thank you, though." He stood up, kissed her on the forehead, and retreated to his sanctuary. Inside, he carefully locked the door behind him. Moments later, he was freeing himself from the tailored trousers and crisp shirt that defined his daily persona. In the quiet, he reached for a small, neatly pressed skirt and a blouse of soft material that glided across his skin. He let himself slip into the persona he secretly cherished, applying makeup with shaky but deliberate hands. All the dread he carried seemed to float away as he finished preparing. He breathed deeply and gazed at his reflection. Alice looked back from the mirror, a version of him that felt tender and eased. He turned on soft music to fill the silence. The gentle melody served as a backdrop for the sensations he seldom allowed himself to experience. In this small corner of the world, he was free from the expectations that always bore down on him outside this room. Hours passed like minutes, and the demands of tomorrow's client meetings faded into the background. He tried to forget the swirl of anxieties about mortgages, professional reputations, and the fear of condemnation. Here, he felt an unexplainable calm, yet at times it struck him how close he was to losing everything if anyone learned about this. Even though he didn't feel that what he was doing was inherently wrong, he could not shake the possibility that Claire might see it as betrayal. She had never given him reason to doubt her empathy, but it remained uncertain how she would respond to something so far outside what she might expect. By midnight, though he wished he could remain in this comforting state, he knew he had to revert to the familiar version of himself. He sighed, removing the lipstick carefully and changing back into his everyday clothes. He locked away every trace of Alice with methodical caution, scanning the floor and counters for any item out of place. Then he stood in front of the mirror again, now as Arthur. Before unlocking the door, he pressed his ear against the wood, listening. Silence. Claire was likely already in bed. He switched off the light and stepped into the hallway, quietly shutting the office door behind him. Upstairs, he found Claire reading in bed, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, and her glasses perched on her nose as she flipped through a few pages of legal text. She glanced over the rim of her glasses. "You're back late," she remarked in a gentle voice. "All sorted out?" He nodded and tried to muster a casual grin. "Mostly. I might need to do more tomorrow." She closed her book. "All right. Try to get some rest." He slipped under the covers beside her, forcing himself to remain still. His mind buzzed with the tension of having just walked a tightrope. Claire reached out to turn off the lamp, and darkness settled over them. He listened to her breathing, wondering how he would ever find the right way to share the truth with the woman he loved. The next few weeks followed a similar pattern. Arthur would disappear into his office for hours, and Claire's suspicions grew. She noticed that some deliveries arrived at peculiar times, addressed to him personally. He made sure to meet the delivery person himself whenever possible, but on one occasion, while he was in the shower, a package arrived and she signed for it. The box felt light, as if it contained something delicate. Naturally curious, she checked the label. It was from a boutique in another state, which immediately raised a red flag. Arthur had never mentioned traveling to that place, let alone shopping there. When he came downstairs, still toweling off his hair, he found Claire standing by the kitchen counter with the unopened package. She looked at him with mild concern. "A delivery came for you, from somewhere you've never mentioned." He feigned nonchalance. "Oh, that's just some specialized design materials," he said, taking the box from her hands. "They don't stock them locally. I had to order from out of state." Claire stared at him for an extra second, as though evaluating whether to accept that explanation. Then she let out a measured breath and said, "You've been more guarded lately, Arthur. You'd tell me if something was seriously wrong, wouldn't you?" He set the box aside. "Of course," he said, forcing an easy tone. "Really, it's just office materials. I'm sorry if I've worried you." Her expression softened, but there was still a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "All right," she whispered. "I'll trust you." Arthur gave her a small nod and excused himself, heading to his office to open the package in private. Inside were 2 items, a pair of elegant pumps and a delicate blouse. He swallowed and immediately felt a pang of guilt in his chest, remembering Claire's troubled look. He placed them in the hidden trunk with care. That evening, after dinner, Claire placed her hands on her hips and asked, "Arthur, can we talk for a minute in the living room?" He sensed the gravity in her voice and followed her to the couch. They sat down, and she turned to face him fully, legs crossed in a poised manner. "Things aren't the same as they were. You used to share more with me, but now you seem distant. I know your work is demanding, but this is beyond the normal stress. Please be honest with me. Are you in some kind of trouble?" He stiffened, feeling an invisible cord tighten around his chest. "Claire, you know me. I don't do anything reckless. The firm is fine, and I'm not in trouble." Her voice softened. "I don't want to accuse you of anything, but if you were seeing someone else, I hope you'd tell me. I can handle the truth. I just can't keep living with this uncertainty." A pang of shock coursed through him at her words. He reached for her hand. "That's not it," he managed, voice tight with emotion. "I promise you, I'm not having an affair." She studied his eyes, searching for any sign of deception, then nodded. "If it's not that, then what? Because you're hiding something. I feel it." Arthur swallowed, feeling cornered yet desperate to maintain the only semblance of control he had left. "I'm not ready to talk about it. It's personal, but I swear it has nothing to do with another woman. Please, just trust me a bit longer." Her face revealed a swirl of emotions, hurt, worry, and something else he couldn't quite read. Finally, she sighed and rubbed her temples. "All right, but know that if you ever want to open up, I'm here. Keeping secrets will only harm us in the long run." He nodded. "I appreciate that," he said, though inside he felt little relief. He wished for the courage to offer some explanation, but he just couldn't. Not yet. That night, Arthur tried to focus on some design documents instead of indulging in his usual ritual. But the strain of it all, his wife's suspicions, his own sense of guilt, tugged at him, making him crave that calm feeling more intensely. After pacing his office for nearly an hour, he gave in, locking the door and slowly opening the trunk. He touched the blouse he had just bought, running his fingers across the delicate fabric. In the mirror, he tried it on. His reflection changed from stiff, formally dressed Arthur to Alice, a figure that breathed more gently, unburdened by the day's demands. He exhaled, letting tension seep from his shoulders. As he sat at his desk in this attire, he flicked on a small lamp and tried to read through his notes for the next day's meeting. But his thoughts wandered to Claire. He felt guilt, yes, but also frustration that he couldn't bring himself to confide in her. He worried about how she might react. He knew she was a strong, grounded woman, but this was a side of him that most would find surprising, even shocking. He hated the feeling of lying to her, yet he felt equally trapped by the fear of her rejection. Midnight approached, and he began the slow process of reversion. He changed out of the clothes, removed all traces of makeup, cleaned his lipstick from a tissue, and locked everything away. After double-checking that the office showed no signs of his secret, he emerged to find the upstairs lights off. Claire was already asleep, or at least in bed with the lights out. He slipped under the covers, careful not to wake her. In the silence, her voice broke the darkness. "Arthur, is that you?" "Yes. Sorry if I woke you." She turned over. "Did you get your work done?" "Most of it," he replied, trying to keep his tone calm and unremarkable. She sighed, and in a voice thick with both weariness and concern, she said, "I wish you'd tell me what's really happening." He wanted to respond, to put her mind at ease or at least give her some measure of truth. But he froze, unable to form the right words. Moments later, she turned again, facing away. He stared at the ceiling, wishing time would slow down so he could figure out how to move forward. In the following days, Claire became more investigative. It was in her nature to assemble facts and interpret them. She began to test small boundaries in the house, occasionally walking up to Arthur's office door and knocking unexpectedly. He would hastily unlock the door, trying to keep his voice even as panic shot through him. One afternoon while he was at work, she inspected the office when a phone call for him came in on the landline. Their house was neat, but she noticed small hints of something that didn't quite add up. A slight smudge on the corner of his desk that looked suspiciously like foundation. A subtle trace of lipstick on a stray tissue in the wastebasket. Her heart pounded with every new detail. She wasn't certain how to interpret them. Initially, her mind went back to the possibility of an affair. Did he have a woman in his office at night? But that made little sense. There was no sign of perfume or an unknown female presence anywhere else. Feeling a surge of anxiety, she returned to the living room and sank into the couch. Her arms rested limply at her sides, her mind racing. "What are you hiding, Arthur?" she murmured under her breath. So far, she had only vague clues, but each one pressed her with more urgency. She thought about confronting him again, but after their last tense conversation, she dreaded more conflict without concrete evidence. That evening, Arthur returned from the office, dropping his keys on the small table by the entryway. Claire greeted him, forcing a polite smile. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, leading him into the living room. He replied with a standard summary about design reviews and staff management. She listened, but her mind circled around the anomalies she had discovered. After he finished, she said gently, "I need to talk to you, and I need you to hear me out. Can you promise me that?" He nodded, looking concerned. "Of course." She drew a breath. "I looked in your office today. I wasn't snooping around exactly, but I couldn't help noticing certain things that I can't explain. It's not something that belongs to me, and it's not, well, it doesn't match anything a casual visitor might leave. Arthur, I saw a makeup smudge on the desk and some lipstick on a tissue in the trash." Immediately, his mind roared with alarm, yet he struggled to keep his features neutral. "Makeup?" He tried to sound confused, but his voice trembled slightly. "I don't know. Maybe a coworker dropped by, or—" She cut him off gently, her eyes filling with a kind of sad urgency. "We don't have coworkers dropping by at 11 at night, Arthur, and you know it. Please don't insult me with half-truths." He swallowed, feeling as though the air had thickened. Claire continued, "I told you, I trust you to be honest with me, but I'm stuck trying to rationalize something that's clearly not adding up. I need a real explanation." He stared at the floor, fear rattling him more strongly than any confrontation he'd faced before. "Claire, Her expression showed a combination of dread and compassion. "If there's someone else, tell me. If something else is happening, I deserve to know. I'm ready to listen, but I can't keep spinning these stories in my head." Arthur exhaled unsteadily, A storm raged inside him. Part of him wanted to say it, to lay everything out, the clothes, the shoes, the persona that brought him a strange kind of comfort. But his voice felt trapped in his throat. Finally, he rose from the couch and walked to the window. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn. He placed a hand on the windowsill and spoke in a trembling voice. "I'm sorry. I can't do this right now." She watched him, her face etched with hurt. "Arthur," she said softly, "I love you, but please don't leave me in the dark. We've built so much together." He turned, eyes wet. "I love you too," he whispered. "This has nothing to do with you. I just can't talk about it yet." With that, he headed upstairs, leaving her alone in the living room, the silence heavy and unresolved. That night, Arthur didn't lock himself in his office. Instead, he lay awake in bed, flipping through possible ways to tell Claire without upending their entire life. Yet he sensed that every minute of delay only magnified the tension and heartbreak. He could feel Claire's restless turn in bed next to him, her breath uneven. The next morning she was gone early, presumably heading to the courthouse or her office. He found a note on the kitchen counter. "We need to figure this out, Arthur. Please let me know when you're ready to talk." He stared at her handwriting, guilt clawing at him. At work, he tried to focus, but his design sketches blurred before his eyes. He responded to colleagues in rote fashion, offering only the bare minimum guidance to keep the project moving. Eventually, one of his associates, an earnest younger architect named Beth, knocked gently on his open office door. "Hey, boss," she said cautiously. "Is everything okay? You seem different lately." Arthur looked up from his desk. Beth was a bright mind, not yet jaded by the profession's pressures. "I'm fine," he lied. "Just a lot on my plate." She nodded, though her concern lingered on her face. "Well, if you need anything, or if you want me to handle some tasks, let me know, okay?" He nodded. "Thank you, Beth," he replied, dismissing her with a polite half-smile. By lunchtime, he knew he was too distracted to do much good at the office. He feigned a headache and told his assistant he needed the rest of the day off. He drove around aimlessly for a while, meandering through neighborhoods he didn't normally visit. Eventually, he parked at a small cafe, ordered a tea, and sat at a corner table, trying to calm the war in his head. He wrote potential confessions on napkins, only to crumple them up. The fear of losing Claire, of losing the respect of everyone he knew, nearly paralyzed him. Around 3 p.m, he returned to the house, walked up the stairs, and stood in the doorway of his private office. This room that had become both a haven and a source of terror loomed before him. He stepped inside, closed the door, and sank into the office chair, gazing at the locked trunk. After a moment's hesitation, he found the key and opened it. One by one, he lifted out the items: skirts, blouses, the pumps, a wig he sometimes wore for an extra layer of immersion, the makeup bag. Each piece told a story of late-night solace. He laid them on his desk, feeling a strange sense of tender fear. Then, in a burst of resolve, he gathered everything into a large plastic bin, left the house, and placed it in the trunk of his car. He wasn't sure why. Perhaps part of him thought that removing the items would give him clarity, or make him feel less conflicted at home. When Claire came back that evening, she noticed he was not his usual tense self, but rather subdued, as though he had run out of the energy to hold up a facade. She placed her purse on the table and walked over to him. "Did you go to work today?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Half a day. I wasn't feeling well. I left early." She rested a hand on his shoulder. "Do you think we can finally talk? I've been worried sick." He nodded, letting out a shuddering breath. "Let's sit." They moved to the living room couch again. He took her hands in his and spoke quietly, staring at their intertwined fingers as he began. "Claire, You're right. I've been lying to you, and I hate that I have. But what I'm about to say is difficult to share, and I'm afraid you'll see me differently." She squeezed his hands gently. "Arthur, I'm here. I just need the truth." He swallowed. Over the past few years, I found a way to deal with stress that many would see as unusual. It began accidentally, but it brought me a sense of calm. I started wearing women's clothes in private. I have a whole collection, makeup too." He paused, letting his words sink in. Her eyes widened. She didn't speak yet, but he felt her hands tremble. He pressed on, his voice quivering. "I've been doing it at night, in my office, when you're asleep or busy. I even gave that side of me a name, Alice. It's not about an affair, and it's not that I want to leave you. It's this space that felt safer somehow, letting me unburden myself of the rigid standards I live with every day. I've hidden it because I was afraid of what you might think, or that you would leave me." He finally dared to meet her eyes. Shock played across her features, and her mouth parted as she searched for words. Silence lingered, broken only by the soft hum of the heating vent. After a moment, she asked quietly, "So that's the reason for the makeup? The reason for the secrecy? You were becoming Alice alone in your office?" He nodded. "Yes, I know it sounds strange, but it's the truth." Claire exhaled, and tears sprang to her eyes. "You've been carrying this by yourself for how long?" He stared at the floor. "A couple of years, on and off. I never meant to lie to you, but every time I considered telling you, my fear got the best of me. I'm sorry." She was silent for a long moment, digesting the revelation. Arthur's heart thudded as if it might crack his ribs. Then Claire finally spoke, her voice tremulous. "I thought you were having an affair. I thought maybe you'd found someone. I was so certain we were drifting apart. But this is something else entirely." He watched her face, seeing more questions there. "I wish I had told you sooner," he said, "but I was terrified. Terrified of losing you, of being judged." She looked at him with tearful eyes. "You should have known you could talk to me about anything." "I know," he said. "I just didn't want to risk it. It felt so out of step with the life we built. For a long time, it was the only way I knew to handle the enormous pressure I always feel. I never wanted you to think I was betraying you." She took a shaky breath and wiped her tears. "I need time. I need to process this because it's a lot. I'm relieved it's not another woman, but I also feel a bit hurt that you kept this from me for so long." He nodded, tears gathering at the corners of his own eyes. "I understand. I don't expect you to accept this overnight. I just needed to tell you." Claire rested her head in her hands, silent for a stretch of seconds that felt infinite to Arthur. Then she lifted her gaze, eyes clouded with emotion. "Arthur, I can't pretend this is simple, but I'm your wife, and I know you're a good man. You should have shared it with me, though." "I know," he whispered, voice raw. "I'm sorry." She nodded, as if acknowledging both his apology and the complicated road ahead. They sat there, hands still clasped, each realizing that the conversation had changed their marriage irrevocably. Whether that would strengthen or weaken their bond remained unclear. Over the next several days, an uneasy truce of sorts formed between them. Claire didn't bring up the subject unless Arthur did. He gave her space, sleeping fitfully, uncertain how to behave around her. She was polite but distant, no longer searching for signs of an affair, yet still grappling with her own tangle of emotions. He recognized that her silence wasn't acceptance. It was simply the first stage in dealing with a truth that caught her off guard. One night, after a tense, wordless dinner, Claire set down her fork and said, "Arthur, Can we talk?" He nodded. "Yes, of course." She placed her napkin on the table, stood, and walked toward the living room. He followed. They sat, and she drew a breath, steeling herself. "I've thought a lot about what you told me. This is new to me, and I have questions, but I also have concerns. It's been secretive, and I feel like I've been excluded from a big part of your life. I want to understand it better, but I'm not sure how." Arthur pressed his lips together, grateful she was engaging. "I'm willing to explain anything you want. Honestly, it's something I did to find relief when everything else was stressful. It helps me let go of the constant pressure to be, well, the man everyone else expects me to be. That doesn't mean I love you any less. I never wanted to push you away." She nodded, eyes filling with tears. "It's just hard because I didn't recognize that side of you. And it's painful to think you felt you couldn't come to me." He gently put his hand over hers. "Claire, you've always been strong, smart, and open-minded. But this was personal in a way I couldn't articulate. I thought you might feel betrayed." She closed her eyes briefly, trying to form her words carefully. "I do feel some betrayal, but not because of what you do in private, but because you hid it. If this is a part of you, then I need to know how it fits into our life. Are you going to keep doing it? Do you want me involved somehow?" Arthur's heart fluttered with nervous relief that she was at least entertaining the possibility of dialogue rather than condemnation. "I don't know," he admitted. "I haven't thought that far ahead. I removed everything from the house because I didn't want to upset you. It's in my car's trunk right now, actually. I suppose I figured if it disturbed you, I could just get rid of it and never do it again." Claire studied him. "You'd do that?" He sighed, voice heavy. "I'd do whatever it takes to fix this between us, but I won't lie. I found a kind of calm in those moments. It's hard to simply abandon it. Still, our marriage is more important to me." She nodded slowly. "I appreciate that. But let's not rush into a decision. Give me a little time." "Of course," he said, grateful for any possibility of resolution. Days turned into weeks. Claire alternated between long bouts of thought and occasional tentative discussions with Arthur. She asked questions, trying to piece together the emotional underpinnings of what he was doing. He answered as candidly as he could, often wrestling with words, because he'd never spoken aloud about these feelings before. One Saturday morning, she approached him in the kitchen. He was making coffee, dressed in casual weekend clothes, khakis and a polo shirt. She leaned on the counter. "Arthur, I want to see it." He turned, puzzled. "See what?" She looked at him with a determined expression. "What you wear, the clothes, the look you create for yourself. I want to meet Alice, or however you want to phrase it. I need to know exactly what you've been experiencing." He stared at her, chest tight with anxiety. "Are you sure?" She gave a shaky nod. "Yes, because as long as it stays hidden, it'll always be something that drives a wedge between us. I'd rather confront it than pretend it doesn't exist." He almost dropped the mug he was holding. Trembling slightly, he said, "All right, I have the clothes in my car. I'll bring them in." A few minutes later, he entered the house carrying the plastic bin. Claire was sitting on the couch, hands clasped in her lap, looking both resolute and nervous. Arthur placed the bin on the floor and opened it, revealing the carefully folded garments, shoes, makeup bag, and wig. Her eyes flickered with discomfort and curiosity. "All right," she said softly. "Let's do this." Arthur hesitated. "You don't have to be in the room if that's too awkward. I could—" She interrupted. "I'd like to see the transformation, if that's okay." He nodded, swallowing hard. "We can go upstairs. It might be easier if I show you in the bedroom." They walked upstairs, and Arthur laid out some of the items on the bed, feeling exposed under her watchful gaze. She stepped closer, examining each piece. "You really took care of all this," she remarked quietly, seeing how neatly everything was stored. He managed a small smile. "I treated it with the same meticulousness I give to everything else. It was my secret, so it had to be perfect." Claire nodded, then gestured for him to go on. Slowly, he changed out of his casual clothes and slipped on the delicate skirt, blouse, and finally the wig. Even with the door shut, he felt a rush of vulnerability, aware that the love of his life stood a few feet away, seeing him in a way she never had before. He turned to the mirror and carefully applied a bit of foundation, then some lipstick, his hands shaking. Claire watched closely, arms folded. The tension in the air was palpable. After he finished, he turned to face her. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of Alice. Arthur's posture softened in this attire, and his eyes had a calmness she hadn't seen in ages. She walked a slow circle around him, taking in every detail, from the wig style to the fit of the blouse. Then she stopped in front of him, searching his face. He braced himself for her reaction: disgust, shock, pity, or something else entirely. Finally, she said, "You look different, softer. I almost didn't recognize you." He nodded. "That's how it feels. Like I can let go of the pressure to always be in control." She stepped closer, hesitated, then reached out to gently touch his wig, straightening a stray strand of hair. "It's surprising," she said quietly, "but I can see how much it means to you. I can feel the tension leave your body." Arthur felt tears threatening to gather. "That's why I do this," he said shakily. "It's like releasing a part of me that's been caged in." Claire stood there for a long moment, gazing at him, before she enveloped him in a tentative hug. He melted into it, burying his face against her shoulder, feeling more vulnerable than he ever had in their entire marriage. She stroked the back of his blouse, and when they finally pulled apart, she had tears in her eyes. "I don't know where this leaves us," she murmured, "but I want you to be open. No more locked doors, no more secrets. If we're going to handle this, it has to be together." He nodded, eyes brimming. "I want that too." From that day on, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Claire still struggled, sometimes waking up in the middle of the night unsettled by the memory of seeing Arthur in such different attire. But she didn't deny that Arthur's honesty relieved the tension that had plagued them for months. In quieter moments, she found herself reflecting on the boundaries of identity and how much she truly knew the man she married. One evening, they sat by the fireplace after an especially grueling day of work for both of them. Claire sipped her tea and looked at Arthur. "Have you felt the need to dress lately?" she asked, her tone matter-of-fact. He hesitated. "Sometimes, yes, but I've been holding back because of all that's happened." She set her mug down. "I won't pretend it doesn't feel strange, but if you're doing it in secret again, we'll be back where we started. I can't handle another round of guessing and mistrust. I'd rather you be honest." Arthur studied her features, seeing the underlying struggle behind her calm words. "Thank you for saying that. The secrecy was the hardest part for both of us." She nodded. "Maybe one night you can show me your routine." Her gaze fell to her teacup as she added, almost shyly, "If you want." His heart pounded at the suggestion, uncertain whether to feel excitement or fear. "I'd appreciate having you there," he admitted, "but only if you're comfortable." Claire exhaled slowly. "I can't say it's entirely comfortable, but I don't want to hide from it. I'd rather face it alongside you." He reached over and rested his hand on hers, moved by her willingness to explore this part of him, despite her own reservations. The next evening, after they finished a simple dinner of pasta, Claire looked at him across the table. "Let's do it tonight," she suggested. Arthur's stomach did a small flip. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and said, "All right." They cleaned up the dishes side by side, both speaking little, as though each step they took brought them closer to the moment they had agreed upon. Then they moved upstairs to their bedroom, where Arthur retrieved the bin that had once been stashed in his car trunk. He let out a shaky breath. "I'm nervous," he admitted. She placed a hand on his arm. "I am too, but let's see how it goes." Taking a seat at the edge of the bed, she watched as he methodically laid out a skirt and blouse, along with the wig and a small bag of makeup supplies. He began to change, removing his everyday clothes. She averted her eyes respectfully at first, but then forced herself to keep watching, telling herself that if they were going to find a place of understanding, she needed to see the process. Once he was fully dressed, he started applying foundation, followed by lipstick. She noticed the quiet concentration that settled over him, how each motion was deliberate and calming. The tension in his shoulders disappeared, replaced by a gentler posture that she rarely saw in his daily life. When he finally turned to face her, wearing the wig and a subtle touch of blush, she inhaled quietly. "You do seem calmer," she said, trying to find the right words. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yes, that's the effect it has." She stood, walked over, and hesitated before taking one of his hands in hers. The fabric of the skirt brushed lightly against her. He gave her a timid smile. A swirl of conflicting thoughts danced across her features. Relief that he wasn't hiding anymore, lingering discomfort at the unfamiliar sight, a spark of empathy for the vulnerability he'd shown, and a dash of curiosity about who this version of him was. They stood there for a few moments, letting a new kind of closeness form. Finally, she broke the silence with a quivering voice. "Arthur, or Alice. I'm not entirely sure what to call you now." He managed a gentle laugh. "Arthur is fine. Alice is what I call this side of me. But it's not another person. It's still me, just a different aspect of who I am." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They ended up sitting on the bed, side by side, talking in hushed tones about the stress that had led him down this path, the relief he felt each time he allowed himself to dress differently, and the years of secrecy that had weighed him down. Claire asked soft questions, sometimes haltingly, as if worried about overstepping. "Have you ever wanted to dress like this outside, or is it strictly a private thing?" He responded quietly. "So far, I've only done it here, when I'm alone. I've never had the urge to show anyone else. The idea of taking it outside our home honestly frightens me. I just needed an escape from the constant expectations. But maybe in the future. I'm not sure. Right now it feels too risky." She nodded, thoughtful. Then she glanced at the mirror across the room. "Come here," she said, rising. He followed her, standing before the full-length mirror. Their reflections showed a surprising contrast. Claire, dressed in her professional slacks and blouse from work, and Arthur in his carefully chosen ensemble. She placed her hand on his waist. "I always knew you were under a lot of pressure. I guess I just never realized how deeply it went." He sighed. "I'm sorry. I shut you out. I was afraid of what you'd think." She squeezed his side gently, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "I wish you had trusted me, but I'm glad it's out in the open now." They stood like that for several moments, absorbing the weight of the moment. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound, and for the first time in what felt like ages, Arthur felt a profound release, though he didn't dare label it with words that might trivialize it. It was raw, layered with relief and uncertainty. He knew challenges lay ahead, But at least he and Claire were no longer adversaries across a gulf of hidden truths. Their marriage found a new, if fragile, rhythm. Some nights, Arthur felt comfortable enough to remain in his usual attire, focusing on the next day's work or spending quiet time with Claire. Other nights, with Claire's tentative encouragement, he would slip away to change, sometimes emerging so they could watch a show together or talk as she grew accustomed to seeing him in that different state. It wasn't all easy. Claire had her rough nights, times when she'd stare at him, confusion swirling in her eyes, and quietly excuse herself to collect her thoughts. She grappled with feelings of distance, sometimes questioning whether the man she'd known for decades was vanishing before her eyes. Arthur would offer reassurance, though he couldn't always soothe her doubts. Meanwhile, he worried that she might feel repelled or resentful, that any day she might declare she couldn't bear it anymore. One weekend afternoon, they were tidying the house together, a chore that often ended up with them bantering about chores. That day, there was less playfulness in their conversation, replaced by an unspoken tension that had been lingering. Finally, Claire set down the basket of laundry in frustration. "Arthur, I'm trying to handle everything, but sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for the shoe to drop," she said, crossing her arms. "This isn't just some small quirk. It's a major shift in our life. I've tried to be open, but I still don't fully understand." He wiped his forehead, a pang of guilt tugging at him. "I know. I'm sorry. If there's anything you need me to say or do..." She shook her head, her hair swaying with the motion. "It's not that simple. You've spent years building this private routine. I only started to learn about it recently. There's a gap, and I get scared that you prefer living in that other role instead of living in this marriage, even though you say that's not the case." His heart wrenched at her words. He stepped forward, gently taking her hands in his. "Claire, my feelings for you haven't changed. I'm still the same person who loves you and wants a future with you. This other part is something that helps me breathe easier, but it doesn't erase our marriage. It's not replacing it." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "All right, I'm trying to trust that. I really am. I just need you to keep talking to me, to make space for my feelings too." He squeezed her hands. "I will," he promised. They embraced, the laundry forgotten. In that moment, even though they were both uncertain of the road ahead, they found a fragile unity in their shared resolve to work through it. Several months passed. Their friends and colleagues saw little outward change in Arthur and Claire's routine, save for a slight shift in how Arthur seemed less tense, more patient. Beth, his junior colleague, sometimes teased him gently about his new zen demeanor, but he just chuckled and deflected the compliment with a grin. Claire, meanwhile, was quietly proud of how open-minded she had forced herself to become, though she occasionally confided in a close friend that she and Arthur were working through some personal challenges. She left it at that. On a humid summer night, the two found themselves sitting on their patio after dinner, gazing at fireflies dancing across the lawn. Claire sipped a cool drink, while Arthur rested his hands on his knees, feeling the gentle breeze on his face. She spoke, breaking the silence. "I had a dream last night that we were walking down the street together, both wearing dresses, and people just stared at us. I woke up feeling really anxious." Arthur sighed. "I'm sorry. That sounds intense." She nodded. "It was, but maybe it was my subconscious playing out my worries. I don't know." He looked at her, moonlight illuminating her thoughtful expression. "Claire, I don't want you to be in turmoil. If it ever becomes too hard, please tell me. I don't want this to break us." She reached over and touched his arm. "We're learning together, aren't we? For so long you carried this alone, and now I'm catching up. Some days are easier than others, but I do love you, and you've been here for me through countless difficult situations in the past. I'm not going to let this single aspect overshadow everything we've built." He turned his hand over to lace his fingers with hers. "Thank you," he whispered. They stayed like that, fingers interlaced, watching the sky fade into a blanket of stars. The warm night air seemed to cradle them, and despite the challenges, there was a sense of peace in simply sitting side by side, breathing the same summer breeze. A few weeks later, Arthur decided to show Claire another level of honesty. He had never let anyone see his initial attempts at applying makeup. Some nights it was messy, blotchy, or uneven, but now he invited her to watch, or even help if she was willing. "I have no professional skills," she joked awkwardly, standing by the bedroom mirror. "I only do what I need for work events or nights out. Don't expect me to be some master makeup artist." He offered a faint laugh. "I'm still learning myself. Anything you can share is more than I know." She approached, picking up his foundation brush. They hovered at the mirror, and she gave pointers about blending techniques and color matching. Arthur listened attentively, focusing on her every word. As she dabbed a small amount of foundation across his cheeks, she remarked, "Your skin tone is different than mine, so we'll need something a bit more suited to you. Also, we have to be careful not to go overboard." He nodded, finding the moment oddly intimate. After she finished applying a bit of foundation and suggested a subtle shade of lipstick, she stepped back to view the result. "Looks good," she said with a small smile. He peered at his reflection, grateful for her guidance, and turned to her. The vulnerability in his eyes was reflected in hers. "I never thought we'd be doing this together," he admitted, voice thick with emotion. She pressed her lips together. "Me neither, but it's not as strange as I feared, at least right now." He raised a gentle hand to her cheek. "I appreciate you so much." She simply nodded, holding his gaze in the mirror for a long moment, then stepped away to compose herself. As time went on, they navigated the new contours of their relationship. There were tense days when the mere sight of Arthur's wig or makeup set off a wave of unease in Claire, causing her to question everything. On those days, she'd typically retreat to another room, needing some space. Arthur learned to respect that boundary instead of hounding her for reassurance. On other occasions, they found surprising harmony, like when they decided to reorganize the closet together. Claire joked about the difference in shoe sizes, and Arthur found himself laughing in a way he hadn't in months. It wasn't that their differences vanished, but rather that they were learning to communicate. One evening they went to bed side by side, both exhausted. Arthur watched as Claire set her book aside and turned to him. A fleeting look of hesitation crossed her face before she finally spoke. "I realize that I'm still adjusting, but I also see how much this means to you. We may not have all the answers yet, but I want you to know that I don't hate you for this. I don't resent you. I'm just recalibrating what I thought I knew." He exhaled, relief washing through him. "Thank you," he whispered, leaning in to kiss her softly on the forehead. She sighed into his embrace, closing her eyes. "There are still days when it's hard, but in some ways I feel closer to you because now I see you fully, or at least more than I ever did." He wrapped his arms around her. No secrets, no locked doors. It wasn't a neat storybook resolution. There was no perfect moment where everything clicked into place. Instead, it felt like an ongoing, deeply human process of learning how to exist with each other's truths. 6 months after the day Arthur revealed his secret, the changes to their marriage were visible in subtle ways. Claire no longer feared he was hiding an affair, though she still sometimes caught herself eyeing the trunk of clothes with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Arthur, on his end, was more present, more communicative, like he'd cast off an invisible chain. They found it easier to talk about other aspects of their lives too. Work challenges, dinner plans, weekend getaways, everything felt a bit more genuine. One evening, as they were winding down, Claire noticed Arthur gazing out the window, lost in thought. She approached from behind and rested her chin on his shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly. He turned, a slight smile on his lips. "I was just thinking about how terrified I used to be that you'd find out about Alice. And now, here we are, and you're still with me. It's humbling, and I'm so grateful." She slipped her arms around his waist. "It was a shock, yes, but I'd rather have the real you, complications and all, than live in a pleasant fiction." He nodded, pulling her close. They looked out at the dimly lit street lamps casting pools of golden light. Their neighborhood was quiet, the houses neatly lined, each containing stories and secrets of their own. Arthur took a deep breath. "I wonder how many other people out there have something similar, something they think they can't share with anyone," he mused. Claire tilted her head. "Probably more than we realize, but let's worry about us for now." He nodded. "You're right." She smiled faintly, and together they stood in the soft glow of the lamplight, arms wrapped around each other, not certain of the future but relieved to have reached this fragile new understanding in the present. Arthur's alarm still rang at precisely 6 a.m. on weekdays. He still dressed in a tailored suit for work. He still commanded respect as the meticulous and highly accomplished architect who brought design visions to life. To the outside world, very little had changed, but behind closed doors, a quiet transformation had taken place. Gone was the stifling dread that once haunted him. In its place stood an ongoing journey, one that might never be simple or free of complications, but at least was no longer cloaked in lies. In the hush of the night, he might still visit the drawer or trunk that held Alice's clothing, stepping into a softer role that eased his mind. Sometimes Claire would join him, offering a gentle hand on his shoulder, or remarking on a particular style of skirt. Other nights, he would quietly spend time alone, the sound of a latch clicking signifying he needed solitude, but not secrecy. The guilt he once felt was slowly replaced by cautious honesty, built on the understanding that while they might not see eye to eye on everything, they had chosen to face it together rather than in darkness. Eventually, the sense of crisis waned, replaced by a more measured acceptance that marriages evolve and people contain hidden layers. For Arthur, it wasn't about discarding who he was in the daytime. It was about acknowledging that he could be both the respected architect with a crisp suit and a man who found respite in wearing a graceful blouse at night. Claire, steadfast in her own complexities, came to see that loving Arthur meant embracing both aspects, even if it sometimes made her uneasy. They both learned that honesty can sting and healing isn't immediate, but within the rawness, something genuine can take shape. And in that fragile authenticity, they discovered an unexpected source of strength. Two people standing side by side, determined to forge a path that honored the truths of their shared life, no matter how surprising those truths turned out to be.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.